Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our special series on 75 years of India's independence. Today, we're going to begin the series with the most important aspect of Indian democratic history, and that is India as a constitutional democracy. Now, India is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic with a parliamentary system of government. The republic is governed in terms of the Constitution of India, which was adopted by the Constituent Assembly on 26th of November 1949 and came into force on 26th of January 1950. Now, the Constitution provides for a parliamentary form of government, which is federal in structure, with certain unitary features as well. Our electoral mechanisms and prescriptions have helped us hold free and fair elections and facilitate a smooth transfer of power to successive governments. The Parliament is attempting to ensure ever-increasing levels of accountability of the government through an elaborate system of parliamentary committees. And in this special show, we will analyze the glorious journey of our constitutional democracy in the past 75 years, the challenges ahead, and the ways to tackle those challenges also. And for more on this, we're joined by a very distinguished panel of experts today. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. A. Surya Prakash, who is joining us here in the studio. He's the Vice Chairman of the Executive Council of Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, and also a very well-known veteran journalist as well. Welcome to Sansad TV Studios, Mr. Surya Prakash.
Thank you. Thank you to have me.
Thank you, sir. We are also joined by Mr. Harish Salve, Senior Advocate, and Mr. O.P. Rawat, former Chief Election Commissioner of India. Welcome, both of you gentlemen, as well to Sansad Television. Let me begin with you, Mr. Surya Prakash, since you've kept a tab on various developments of Indian democracy as a journalist for the past 50-odd years and in various other capacities as well. Let's start by, trying to summarize. I know it's not easy to summarize this glorious journey in, say, 4 or 5 minutes, but let's try and attempt to give our viewers a clear view of how we started and where have we reached.
I think on the 75th year of our independence, we must really congratulate our constitution makers, because this journey, we are the most diverse society in the world, and I do believe that we are the most vibrant democracy in the world. Now, we have kept both of this going in our own remarkable way. And I think if there is one thing which has kept us together, the amalgam, as I would say, is the Constitution of India. And the kind of flexibility that it has introduced into the whole scheme of things, and in the sharing of powers of the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, and so on. I think it's an amazing document, and if we are a united nation today, and with a firm resolve to remain united and march ahead, a lot of credit must go to what we call the Constitution. Many skeptics, in fact, Ivor Jennings said it is too long, too rigid. Many other Western scholars, Churchill almost laughed it off. He said, how are these guys ever going to run a democracy, and so on. So we have proved them wrong. And I think Dr. Ambedkar and the drafting committee, the way they have gone about this business has enabled all of us to remain united, to remain democratic. Indeed. This would be my initial comments.
Indeed, and futuristic as well, in terms of looking
absolutely.
at what challenges the country might face 50 years, 60 years, or 70 years, even perhaps 80, 90 years down the line. Let me bring in quick, initial comments from the other two panelists as well. Mr. Salve, when we look at the Indian Constitution, and as Mr. Surya Prakash was saying, that initially there were a lot of skepticism when the Constitution was drafted and adopted as well. But over the years, not only us, but people across the globe have come to this conclusion that India, in fact, seems to have one of the finest constitutions in the democracies across the globe.
Yeah, constitution is as good as the people who work it. But having said that, let me start by saying, when you talk of 75 years of the Indian Constitution, and when you speak of the founding fathers who gave us this magnificent document, which has shaped the destiny of the subcontinent. It's time also to remember what is it that they did and what are some of the spots which we have put on the Constitution. They gave us a sovereign democratic republic. And that's what India is. India is sovereign. India is a democracy with a complete marketplace for all kinds of ideas. And India is a republic.
Mm-hmm.
The 42nd Amendment added two words which not only spoilt the lyrical beauty of our preamble, but added controversial concepts: socialism and secularism. And maybe on the 75th year, we decide to drop these words. Secularism is a part of our DNA, but it defies constitutional definition. Socialism is even worse. Socialism is a transient economic philosophy, and different people have different notions of socialism.
Mm-hmm.
If you remove that, we have a magnificent constitution. And two of the features as a lawyer of our constitution which have held us in good stead is the balance between citizens' rights and the directive principles of state policy. As you know, we picked up the notion of directive principles of state policy from the Irish Constitution. But we were very clear that the citizens' rights were to prevail. And that's why the balance between Part 3 and Part 4.
Okay.
The second defining feature of our Constitution has been, unlike the much criticized American court's creation of judicial review, the power of a court to strike down a law, our Constitution accepted that as a constitutional principle and gave the last word of constitutional interpretation to the judiciary. And I think that gives you the foresight of the framers of the Constitution, who knew that there was some criticism,
Mm-hmm.
some skepticism. And how could we safeguard against that skepticism? Because the skepticism was, you have no experience of running a democracy. And they were right. We had no experience.
Okay.
So we built in checks and safeguards. And that's why our Constitution became so big. Jennings has criticized it, that's his point of view. That is why our Constitution became so big. And in hindsight, there is hardly any provision of this Constitution which we have not needed. So we needed all these principles, and that is what has delivered to us the three defining features which I think put us beyond any of our immediate neighbors.
Okay.
You have a free functioning political system where we change governments by the ballot,
Mm-hmm.
not the bullet. You have a robust press, if at all, a little too independent rather than subservient. And you have an independent judiciary. And these are the three major underpinnings of any great democracy. And I think
Okay.
we should be proud of what we have achieved in the last 75 years. There's a journey ahead. Maybe it's time to look back at some of the things which we need to correct.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay, indeed.
Moment that you can sit back.
I'll take one of those points too, Mr. O.P. Rawat here, one of the last points which you made, Mr. Salve, and that is about, the political structure. That's one, how the governments are made, and, the successful transfer of power there. All of that being enabled by a robust electoral mechanism there as well. Mr. Rawat, you've been at the helm of, affairs in the Election Commission of India. And this is one particular institution which seems to have, stood upright and also garnered a lot of praise across the globe as well. A lot of democracies are looking forward or looking towards India and the Election Commission of India in terms of how the elections, free and fair elections, should be conducted.
Yes, I agree that Constitution, Article 324 to 329, paved the way for an independent election commission. And the election commission lived up to those expectations, starting the first election. Delivering first election in time making a voter list from 3 crores under the Government of India Act 1935 to 17 crore voters, because universal suffrage was integral to our constitution. So bringing that electoral roll, when due to partition, many families did not have any address. They were refugees. All those problems were there. Even then, Election Commission delivered an electoral roll and delivered elections with multiple ballot boxes at every polling station, because literacy levels were so low, hardly 10%. People could not read or could not sort of judge where to put the mark. And therefore, for every candidate, we had a different ballot box. You just have to put in your ballot in that box and the vote goes to that candidate. For 2 elections, we had that kind of thing. And even Britishers who left India in 1947, they were saying that India is doing a great disservice to their nation by giving universal suffrage. And we proved them wrong. Starting there, a lot of things happened in the last 72 years of electoral history. But every time, whenever skeptics brought any argument or any apprehension, elections were delivered free, fair, and credible manner, and therefore transfer of power was always bloodless, accepted by all parties, all stakeholders.
Indeed.
And therefore, I feel that if India can be proud of something after 72 years of independence, that is delivering free, fair, and credible elections every time having a transfer of power in states or center without any hiccup.
Indeed, indeed. That electoral mechanism is a proud part of our, constitutional democratic journey, which we have had so far in the past 75 years. One aspect, Mr. Surya Prakash, and as Mr. Salve was also referring to, that balancing mechanism within the constitution when we're talking about, it's not just about the rights, but it's also about the duties, the directive principles as well. And it seems to be such an exhaustive document that it looks at almost all aspects which can be thought of as of now.
Yes, in fact, Gandhiji had said that he would any day prefer man-made texts to God-given texts, because man-made texts are open to emendations. The Indian Constitution is an example of that. We have had 105 amendments. There are many scholars who would probably ridicule this as to how many times you amend your constitution. To which my answer would be, sir, we are the most diverse society in the world. 1,400 million people, 900 million electors. Please leave it to us. We know how to manage our affairs. And it is that flexibility, it is the right to amend and right to amend at the right time, which has kept us together, which binds us as a nation. That is one point.
Okay.
The other thing is the extraordinary foresight of our constitution makers. For example, the whole idea of of federalism in India, a flexible federation with a unitary tilt in certain situations. Look at their foresight. I don't think Ambedkar and others could have ever imagined today half of India is governed by political parties which are opposed to the political party which is governing us at the federal level. And there are many of them are coalitions. In my view, I have estimated there are over 40 political parties which are in power at the federal level and in the states in this country today. And to keep this country going, you have a constitution which in an emergency will just give you that little unitary tilt to bind this nation together.
Okay.
And Dr. Ambedkar has explained the reason for that also. He says that the residuary power must rest with the union in terms of crisis and so on. So if you look at our journey, if you look at their foresight, I think it's really remarkable. And the constitution has stood the test of time, I would say.
Okay, okay. You spoke about the adaptive nature of the constitution. I'd like to bring in Mr. Salve here. Mr. Salve, in terms of the amendments or the changes to the Constitution which we have seen, some would say they are large in number, and as Mr. Surya Prakash is pointing out, that of course that has been the need of the time as and when required, and that is the nature of our Constitution and beauty as well. But two aspects. One, we would like to understand from you the key amendments which you would look at when you look at the past, one, and two, this adaptive nature of the Constitution itself, this flexibility to ensure that we can interpret and amend as per the requirements.
That's been one of the most remarkable parts of our constitutional journey. Our Supreme Court invented, and God bless them for doing that, invented the doctrine of basic structure. And the way basic structure is defined, and that's where the values get captured. Secularism, the balance between union and states, these are the most important values on which our country is founded. Equality. These are part of the basic structure. So they have carved the outer boundary within which Parliament, 2/3 present and voting, can amend the Constitution. So that is what gives you the flexibility. With an outer perimeter which you cannot cross. So you cannot make a law which breaches the philosophy, the constitutional philosophy of secularism. That's one of the great successes of our Constitution. You cannot breach a law which takes away the essence of equality. That's one of the great successes of our Constitution. You cannot take away citizens' rights to life and liberty. That's one of the great successes. Within this, Parliament has full play in making whatever laws it likes to make. So that's been the important evolution of our Constitution. And the Supreme Court has repeatedly underscored the importance of maintaining this dynamic balance between the union and the states. And I think the greatest tribute to how the union and states can work together is the GST. The way the GST has been framed and the way the union has ceded power by agreeing to the GST Council and the constitutional amendments by which states have been empowered to make legislation, I think is remarkable. So while the residuary power rests in the union, I think this constitutional journey has shown, contrary to what the critics said, that while we defined ourselves as a sovereign democratic republic with a parliament which was very close to the mother of all parliaments, we say the British Parliament, yet the Supreme Court found an outer penumbra consisting of equality, secularism, life and liberty, and the balance between the union and the states, and said, as long as you don't upset any of this, Parliament is free to amend the Constitution. I think that's been another remarkable evolution of our Constitution.
Mr. Rawat, your views there on this evolutionary nature and the evolution which we have seen of our Constitution over the past 75 years, and the way, as both Mr. Salve and Mr. Surya Prakash are pointing out, that this is one of the very important, strong pillars of our democracy.
Yeah, I fully agree with Mr. Salve and Mr. Surya Prakash that this 75 years journey of our Constitution, which is a very dynamic document, and with the Supreme Court's doctrine of basic structure, the limits to parliamentary changes having been said, I think we have done a wonderful work. And as Mr. Salve initially said, that Constitution is as good as people who work on it. That is really proven, that people who were working on it, whether members of judiciary, whether members of parliament, they proved it that our Constitution is very good, and it has proven that whatever needed to be delivered to preserve democracy in our country, it could do. However, there have been certain challenges, socio-economic front. Since a lot of things could not happen to the extent people's aspiration would want to have, there have been certain fault lines visible also. But I think a lot of attention is being given even to that direction, and things are looking up.
Okay, okay. Mr. Surya Prakash, these two aspects where Mr. Rawat left his comment. One is, the unfulfilled aspirations. Of course, in a democratic setup, there will be a lot of aspirations there. That's one part. How is that being looked at? That's one. And two, the challenges, because these hopes and aspirations are taking new turns and new forms as well. And that's natural also, both with the demographic changes and with the way the time is also changing. The young generation, the young population has new hopes, new aspirations, wants to look at things in a new way.
Yeah, let's take aspirations of the people. Since a large mass of people are either below the poverty line or just above it, at a subsistence level, our institutions have to be there, as the Constitution is the guiding principle for that, and you need institutions which will leverage their powers in order to meet those aspirations. In my view, if you look at the Supreme Court's interpretation of Article 14, equality before law and equal protection of law, Article 21, right to life and personal liberty.
And that applies to every citizen of the country, irrespective of caste, religion, gender.
If you see the elasticity that the court has lent to these two articles, and how right to life is not just right to life, the court has said, I think it's a Bandhuwa Mukti Morcha case, it said right to life means right to life of dignity, to lead a dignified life. From there on, there are so many judgments. Right to life now includes right to potable water, quality air, shelter, health care, and what have you. So, in our democratic journey, constitutional journey, the contribution of the Supreme Court, starting from the 80s and the whole PAL story and so on and so forth, is truly remarkable, and very strong support for the democratic tradition and deepening of the democratic tradition that has happened via the higher judiciary in the country.
Okay.
And that is how we are meeting those aspirations. So, where you find the legislature falling short or the executive falling short, you can be certain that the judiciary will be there to listen to your grievance.
Okay.
I think that is very, very important, and the working of institutions is very critical. In fact, in our country, there hasn't been enough work on democracy studies and very little work on institutions, like how the Election Commission has worked over the last 75 years, whenever it was started, or Comptroller, Auditor General. These are all key institutions which have strengthened the whole democratic process. And I think there is need for greater study and research into the working of these institutions.
Okay, and so that people are also made aware
Yes,
of the way their contribution has been and the significance also.
And the significance of that and how that has strengthened the whole democratic arrangement in the country.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Mr. Surya Prakash and Mr. O.P. Rawat and Mr. Harish Salve as well for sharing your valuable time and inputs with us and our viewers, as our esteemed panelists were pointing out, and summarizing the glorious journey of India as a constitutional democracy for the past 75 years. Various institutions which have played a very important role in this particular journey, and the way our constitution has evolved over the years, the kind of challenges which we still face and how those challenges can be tackled. In this special series, we'll keep on bringing you various aspects of India's journey in the past 75 years. So keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.